Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And then we're going to start to panel 4, which will discuss digital inequalities in the childhood and its implication for the participation in the environmental scene. Bianca Kramer, who is an advisor for CGI.br, you have the floor. We are going to invite Bianca Orrico from the National Committee for Children and Adolescents' Rights, CONANDA, Mrs. Gabriela Mora, representing UNICEF, Ticiane Arin from the University of Ceará, Mr. John Alegria, representing Foundation Roberto Marinho, and Mrs. Alimont from Electronic Frontier Foundation. You have the floor, Bianca. Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to greet EDP for hosting this event, and also all my coordinator, Renata Miele, all other advisors who are also participating at this session. And I also like to greet you all after a very quick lunch. You are still back here in the premises. I am Bianca Kramer. I am a teacher, researcher, and activist for digital rights, and I have a seat in the steering committee of Brazil CGI. I have a seat there. I am also representing the third sector, and I was invited to be the moderator of this panel, and the public policies sector have invited me, or has invited me, better saying. Let me then introduce our speakers, our panelists. We have Bianca Orrico, who is psychologist at SaferNet Brazil, PhD by University of Minas, and also a master in psychology for development by the University of Coimbra, member of the National Committee for the Rights of Children and Adolescents, CONANDA, and National Committee of National and Culture for Human Rights, represented the Ministry of Human Rights and Citizenship. Gabriela Mora. She is an interim head of UNICEF Brazil, and she's undergoing a PhD at Flaxo, Argentina, with a master degree by London School of Economics. And she's got a master degree in social communication by UNB University. Cristiana Darin, associated professor by the University of Ceará. She's got a master and PhD degree in international mobility, and she's author of the book Manual of Digital Autonomy. She is the winner of a Bill Award. She's also individual consultant to the UN by the Justice of Public Privacy, and she has been dedicating her work on the well-being and risk for users of games and any other game applications. We also have João Alegria. I got your bio from your LinkedIn. Secretary General for Roberto Marinho Institute. He works on collective work, creativity, and education as a transformational agent. Eliana Limonte, who is Associate Director for Politics for the Electronic Foundation, working in telco, media, internet, human rights since 2019. She's a lawyer. She's got a PhD in human rights and master in economic rights by the Law University of São Paulo. She was a member of CGI and also here representing the third sector. This is the panel which will address digital inequalities in childhood and adolescence and what can be done to protect their participation in the digital environment. Now I'd like to hand over to our first panelist, Bianca Orrico. Thank you, Bianca. First of all, I'd like to thank CGI and NIC.br for the opportunity to be participating at this very important time as we are addressing protection of children and adolescents. I am a psychologist. I work at SaferNet Brazil, and I represent our organization at Conanda. For those who do not know SaferNet Brazil, that is an organization which has been acting for over 20 years in a responsible use of technologies, emphasizing human beings and with a main focus in children and adolescents. We are related to the European SaferNet network, and we base our activities in a helpline where children, parents, and educators, they may ask for help in case of violence in the web. We have also a report channel for cybernetic cases where we may report humans violations for content which are online that are submitted to the federal police. And also we have a link with some ministries with the database in case of any crime in the internet, and also to work in case of any violation in the network. We also have a safe channel which aims to get any report of attacks at schools. We also have a prevention chapter where we aim to support teachers and parents from the state schools to promote a critical use of technologies by children and adolescents. And another pillar, which is a youth link, where we promote the participation of youngsters in those actions which would include them. As a representative of Conanda, these are some concerns that Conanda has had throughout the years as how we may promote children and adolescent rights and to prevent any sort of violence. Resolution 163 addresses abuse of advertisement for children and adolescents. Such a resolution was created in 2014. Resolution 245 talks about children and adolescents' rights in the digital environment, where they are set as an absolute priority and share responsibility between the state and society. Resolution 257 from 24, which guides general guidelines for a national policy for protection of rights of children and adolescents. And we are participating at this intersectorial committee, which aims to propose, design, and coordinate a public policy. At the committee, we have Conanda's participation, the National Secretary for the Rights of Children and Adolescents. We also have the Communication Secretary of the Republic Presidency and ANPD participating at the same very committee, where we underwent a public hearing to hear different stakeholders representing civil society, third sector, academy, to understand how together we could build up a policy based on what all players had to share with us. After the public hearing, we build up that public hearing, which will have its decree being signed later on this afternoon. Gabriela next will go into details about the UNICEF report with really alarming information. Adolescents under 16, they undergo abuse. We have a great number of adolescents that use at least one social platform. And challenges are related to indicators of the National Center of Reports, which got thousands reports and 63,000, over 63,000 were of social abuse, sexual abuse exploitations, non-concession exposition of intimate pictures. And one of the most common was how to denounce, how to report sexual abuse, thanks to the FELCA law. And some emergent challenges, the use of artificial intelligence for deep fakes and deep nudes to expand the disinformation, and use of AI as emotional support. We get that in the helpline, children and adolescents that looked after AI tools, and then SaferNet Brazil. We also have another challenge, adolescents that are being reached by extreme groups of violence for hate speech and hate actions. Also excessive use of screen time, bet games. Public and private Brazilian schools, they report that their students are playing betting games, and also restriction of smartphones at school. We know how beneficial that was after this law has been endorsed. But yet we have to understand that schools should be part of that dialogue and teach their students as how they could use technology on a safer manner. And this year that we have some new guidelines for computation. I would like to share a reflection about the need to differentiate the technology from education and education to the use of technologies. How can we address that topic, especially with the children and adolescents, and how will that impact their behavior? We have to value our teachers and not just improve their working conditions, but also to understand that they are important players for the promotion of citizenship in the digital environment. And there are several topics to be addressed by schools, including social media. If on one side the protection is negotiable, we also have to acknowledge children and adolescents to have their own rights and include them in the discussion, in the design of public policies, to help designing curriculums, because they have so much to collaborate. They should be participating at sessions like this today to help designing policies, where we should not just protect them, but also to set all the pillars of this protection, where we would include their participation. At Conanda, we have a committee where adolescents participate, and they are of great help. Therefore, let's reinforce that to shorten inequalities, we have to involve children and adolescents at the core of the decision-making process. I like this quote, utopia is in the horizon. I get closer 2 steps and it goes away 2 steps. Then I take another 10 steps and the horizon runs away. What is utopia for? So I can never stop walking. And to repair inequalities, we have to believe that we can indeed change all those inequalities.
Thank you, Bianca. If I may highlight a number of points of your speech before I hand it over to Gabriela. In addition to your contributions as SaferNet and as Konanda, you've shared very relevant data. 85% of children in the Brazilian context, with all the differences that we face of land, of income, they have at least one account in the social media. So we really have to think about aspects of responsibility. And you've also talked about children and adolescents participating in public policies. And someone who talks about that is Renata. She was in the students' movement at her younger age. So I've been thinking about that, the importance of having work methodology and openness for active participation. We have to hear the voices, their interests, especially of teenagers. They have so much to contribute. Thank you very much. Said that, let me hand it over to Gabriela Goulart. She is with UNICEF in Brazil. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here. I would like to say we are not talking about having or not mobile phone, but it also shows inequality. Online experience is widely diversified depending on the child or the adolescent that is accessing the device. Online inequalities also present regardless of social class, but those that are more vulnerable socially would also be more vulnerable when online. Maybe they won't have the same level of resilience. Talking about inequalities, we should always bear in mind that there is more to it: gender, race, class, territory, ethnicity, which determine how these kids and adolescents get their social interactions, whether they protect themselves for risks and all that. The family and community context also play a very important role here. And this is why it's so important to understand digital inequalities and consider the structural inequalities. In a digital environment where the algorithms are far from being neutral, most platforms that adolescents have access to, even those that have limited access to devices, they were not made to protect children and adolescents. So there is this logic of operation that the more hate speech, the more extreme, the greater the visibility. It shows, therefore, the lack of diversity among uh, programmers. We needed more women when programming algorithm, and the lack of thereof there might lead to additional inequalities. Let me now talk about adolescent girls. We are facing very specific situations. There are over 6 million girls. If they have access, opportunity, we can have the largest generation of women in innovation space, transforming everything, including the online world. But this is not what we observe. If we invest in girls, we are going to improve their lives and we are going to have the potential of breaking with cycles of poverty and inequality, because it ends up impacting uh, the family, the community, kids, and so on. But this potential is highly limited by gender norms, which are still limited to a number of old time stereotypes. And this discrepancy is very concrete. It has gained more visibility, it's a fact. Thinking about access, use, skills, a transition to the world of work, development of digital competences, mathematics. This is a group that is underrepresented. At UNICEF, we've been analyzing that regardless of all the challenges it brings to expand the work and to provide more training to the girls and to professionals who work with children and adolescents, bringing the responsibility of all different areas. Really causing and provoking changes that goes beyond content, thinking about education system and everything that happens, because violence at digital world is not set apart from the violence that happens at school, family, community. There are blurred borders. And what Bianca talked about, the disrupting worlds, it does not change it does not show any difference between boys and girls. The girls do not know how to name that. Sometimes they don't even identify it as being violence. They ask for help in terms of depression, anxiety, conflicts, but they are not naming what they are experiencing as being violence. And when girls are victims, rather than asking who is threatening you, we say, "Well, what was she doing? What was she wearing? How was she behaving?" We cannot talk about girls without considering men and masculinity. Boys have also been subject to a lot of pressure without talking about violence and without any help, just feeding, self feeding this environment of online violence. We have to think to what extent algorithms have favored these situations. Let me confirm what Bianca has said about the importance of having adolescents on board as a way of implementing digital ECA, having this their participation in councils, in hearings, in conferences that can happen with the support of schools, for example, implementing the law in a way that it would be really meaningful for adolescents. Without this dialogue, would be missing a major opportunity of having new generations with the appropriate resources and developing resilience in a digital environment that is very healthy and appropriate for their development. Thank you for your punctuality. Well, Gabriela, I think there were two very interesting points. Everything you said, quite relevant, of course. But in my observation, there were two main highlights. First, the importance of intersection. What kind of inequalities are we addressing? You talked about gender, race, sexuality, disability, violences that may be there, and we end up losing sight of them, and we tend not to protect them, something which is not non-palpable, and also the importance of talking about gender and masculinities. Let me hand it over to Tiziani, but let me tell you a short story. I always tell my story. My brother has just started his first job, and he used to be a gamer, that kind of culture. And then he came to tell me someone told him something, and he said, "Gossip, gossip is something of a little girl." So you see, I am fighting violence of gender and race as an activist, and I've been so for over 10 years. And then at home, my brother says something like that: gossip are just for girls. In our personal life, we can believe whatever we want, but in our basic, when we are raised, when we are really uh, grown up, we should avoid this culture of violence. And we've seen that in the media, think being brought from the internet into the physical world. Lots of things to be considered. Thank you very much for your observations. Let me now hand it over to Tiziane Darin, Associate Professor of the Federal University of Ceará, researching human computer interaction. Thank you, Bianca. Thanks, CGI. I'm so glad to be here, part of this panel with people who are bringing very necessary, interesting sides of it. I'm going to do something differently. I'm just going to tell you a story, but it's not about myself. When we are in the academy, we research and we want to see both sides, qualitative and quantitative. We want to understand what's going on and why. In my research study, I've been having contact with children and adolescents, and I heard a story. It was an observation of use. And I could talk to the child. We are going to call him Luca, fictionally, and with his grandmother. I'm going to call it a case study of how manipulative design and obscure patterns have a different impact when you have all different inequalities affecting people. Obscure design, everything that you've heard, but there is a very simple thing that you've heard today. Notifications, call it to go to the mobile phone, and you have to do it there and now. Or you open an app, and when you realize, you don't even know why you had opened it. You just open it because you have a habit, a compulsive habit of doing it. These are very simple examples that this kind of design has over adults and also children. But Luca is a very smart boy, caring, open minded, active. He's 7. His parents are divorced. Most of the time he spends with his grandma. He lives close to the capital of the state, but it's a different city. And his mother works in the city. She spends a long time of the day away from home. He cannot play in the mobile phone, but so what? Luca's grandmother is a caregiver of her own mom, which is a person with Alzheimer. So she has to take care of both of them and life, home, everything. So say, well, better here than being at home, at being out in the street, because he also lives in a dangerous neighborhood. with specific territories, and children may start becoming friends of those who might take them to inappropriate contexts, drug trafficking, etc. So Luca's grandmother allow him to play. Sometimes she says enough, so he goes into the bathroom and gets the mobile phone, or gets behind the sofa and say, "What do you play?" Any guesses? He plays thousands of games that you can use with Avatar. In this mysterious game, Luca has two siblings. He has never met them. He doesn't even know whether they're kids or not. And he experimented once, in case of a person. He said it was an unknown man. They were all avatars, but he supposed it was an unknown man who chased him and his friend and said weird things. I didn't explore further what it meant. And I asked, "How did you feel?" He said, "I was afraid and I quit." "Did you tell your mother?" I asked. "No, she doesn't know I play. Otherwise, she won't allow me to uh, play." And he said, "I need to play." And I know that in his context, there are a number of things that are going to impact this word. I have to play. I need to play. Doesn't mean he is addicted, but maybe it's the only fun time. He has developed some affection with the unknown people, but we cannot ignore that the space he's accessing, it's not a neutral space of leisure. There are a number of elements of a choice architecture to extract maximum time and value out of Luca, regardless of how he's going to feel and how and what kind of risk he's going to be exposed to. I could see everything, right? Everything there. But the risk of contract, which is what I'm going to focus here, which is related with psychological mechanisms there that make him engage as much as possible, especially spending some money. These manipulative tactics are just so present that we don't see it happening. Father and mother are not paying attention. But just for you to have an idea, in a recent research, 96% of most downloaded apps have at least one obscure pattern in the first 10 minutes of use, and 46% of them have seven within the first 10 minutes of use on average. We are just being so much bombarded, we don't even realize that, let alone a child who has the prefrontal cortex still being developed. He cannot regulate emotions, and there is no adult there helping him identify the risks and know what to do. And at the same time, it's quite unfair to expect families such as Lucas to deal with them. They are surviving, they have so much to do. If you stop and think, there are a number of inequalities here. It's not one of them, it's not one point, it's all of them all together. It's the sum of them all. Digital illiteracy of the grandmother, overload of work of the mother and the grandmother. So the smartphone is what? Babysitter. Restrictive mediation of the mother saying, no, you cannot do it. So if anything happens, he doesn't feel comfortable to tell his mother. There are also shared devices, which is a reality in Brazil. As he plays logged as an adult and the grandmother does not know how to set up parental control mechanisms, there are no filters, no mechanisms that would have been thought by the game to protect him. Even if he had it, even if he were in a family that had it all capability, no one would be capable of protecting him from a game that was created to extract elements concerning attention, exploring emotional mechanisms. This is something that should have been seen by the creator of the app. So, safety by designer is key of a digital ECA, and it's there because we cannot allow the protection to be just for those who have time or education. Thank you. Thank you, Tiziani, for your talk. Interesting. Better be in the mobile phone than out in the street. Is it true? Let me now hand it over to João Alegria with Foundation Roberto Marinho. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Bianca. Great to be here. Amazing opportunity and learning a lot from my friends and for the generosity of sharing with us. I've made some notes. We have a pact with time in this panel, right? In the recent participation Soft by Soft West this year, Amy Webb advocated a new way of thinking the scenario and context of digital transformation that she associated with the tracking of storms. It does make sense. We are all being hit by the digital storms. The media sum up is Amy Webb's speech as loneliness, super job, and lack of humans. But that's not exactly what she said. It's correct to say, first, she was talking about expanded human by applying different resources and accessories that maximize our physical and mental capabilities. Rafael Parenti, who was a Secretary of Education, has recently launched a book named Expanded Teachers with the same conceptual perspective. She also talked about the concept of unlimited work, something really scary.
Once the production is automated and continuous, thanks to the implementation of factories without human labor. And she also talked about isolation, when you may, use the emotions for third players. We are constantly connected, but always feeling very lonely. We are ready to, after being isolated, to buy connection, buy connectivity, managed by technology. So the lonely production became a new market in this new world. This introduction is not an invitation for you to become optimistic, not at all, but to help me to explain what are those possible storms as I see as one of the main challenges for the implementation for our dear digital ECA. Constant scenario changes, they represent a threat to what we know as being public policies. Public policy has to do with balance, constance, but that is not the reality. What to do to be able to reach all the guarantees if the transformation which surrounds us is in such a level which is not under control anymore. So we have the approval of the law in September, 7 months ago. Today is the first month that the law is being approved, and it seems that was just a little ago, but not quite if we think about all this digital storm scenario. Therefore, I decided to see the digital ECA from a different perspective, from AI, artificial intelligence, which works as one of the storm indicators. AI is already present at the life of our children and adolescents intensively. And NIC.br has showed that in the release of kids online ICTs. What do I believe to be a storm after the law approval? And what we have decided to do even before we started the implementation. First of all, transparency of artificial mechanisms, which coordinate mechanisms and access of minors. And here I'm talking about artificial tools and not services, neither platforms. Second, auditing of algorithmic biases, which may end up impacting this population. Definition of ethical standards for AI to be an educative or recreative interface. Digital education platforms, they are not as safe as we would imagine. Granular consent in accordance to the age, especially if artificial intelligence personalizes experiences. Guarantee of explicability, which that AI systems should be understood by parents and children's tutors. Restraints in the use of AI for behavioral data collections. Mandatory human supervision. Digital education for children as how AI works and its limits and boundaries. A report mechanisms of AI failures which may involve children. Clear policies in the discontinuity in the use of AI if they are not appropriated to the user's age. And the brief conclusion is there is so much still to be done. All of that has to do with the inequalities, which restrain the future of our Brazilian youngsters. Inequalities in a country such as Brazil, digital transformation is increasing inequalities instead of promoting inclusion. At each technological layer, innovation, inequalities are expanded and not the opposite. And when I see those digital storms, the scenario I see ahead us is a very hard one, as it will strengthen inequalities, and something has to be done, especially in case of children and adolescents. We are here also talking about rights, children and adolescents' rights. And I think we should expand our general list and maybe include the rights to reality, rights to learn, in a time where prompts, they are externalizing the cognitive process. They are removing that from children's mind and now transferring that to machines. That should be the way to be taken in our discussion. And see digital ECA implementation as important, necessary for our mobilization. But we have to understand and see that as somewhat dynamic in constant transformation. Otherwise, we are going to be stuck to something which might end up losing all its meaning. Thank you, João, for your talk. I am optimistic, just as you are, which is hard, I know. And last but not least, Veriana Di Monte, who is Associate Director for EFF Latin America Policies. Hello, everyone. I am so thankful for the invitation made by CGI. This is a key debate, and I'm here on behalf of the Electronic Foundation. We act on technological rights. And here I am to talk about social and digital inequalities. And what is necessary to protect our users in the digital environment. Inequalities, they are aligned to digital technologies if we consider a puzzle of rights. Sonia Livingston mentioned children's rights in her talk, which deals with rights protections with a children-centered approach, including information access, freedom of expression, privacy, data protection, despite we have been talking all day about that. With digital ECA, much has evolved as to prohibition of advertisement, behavioral publicity to children and adolescents. EFF discuss a lot about age verification, age assurance. And I'd like to go into details about some points to be called for attention in the implementation of age verification tools. We have some bias, such as technological limits, documentation issues, devices sharing, digital skills, the quality of the devices, and how can that impact the rights, the exercise to rights. We also assess the implementation used by large platforms for age assurance and verification. And the main ones are inference is important. And we have to understand that inference is not just something which will be less invasive. Many times that may allow data access to third parties by data brokers. And some other actions such as scanning, facial recognition for age estimates, upload of identity documentations, and credit card information. Credit card is already per se an exclusion way. Low income families, they may, transfer money by PIX, but they don't have a credit card. We have other intersections, such as recognition of identity and also as to verification or age estimate. How some people, we might find it difficult sometimes to estimate age with the non-Caucasian users, transgenic and non-binary people who have different facial details in their growing process, and that may affect the way a age verification tool will be able to read that person. And also people with special needs, especially people that have, different faces due to a trauma, an accident, and some systems find it difficult to recognize that that is a person's face, in fact, and other systems that make live check-in with people with mobility restrictions. We sometimes just, give away our ID, such as facial recognition, in ordinary events, but that information may be very sensitive, and it ends up allowing all this leakage of data and frauds, because this facial recognition is done randomly. Around 3 million Brazilians, they still don't have their birth certificate, and 50 million did not have their CPF, or their document had been canceled. And that would include foreigners, refugees, people that have their own vulnerability level, and children and adolescents the same. So many people that will not have a passport, for instance. Brazilian children and adolescents. Since 2015, we have a number of CPF in the birth certificate, which helps in cases like that, especially age verification tools, which aims to set phases before the person is 18 to access content just based on the age classification. Even before someone turns 18, in case of limitations, documentation of this group of people is important, so they'll be able to access what they would be entitled to. Just a CPF, but not with a document, with or without a picture. Would today's documents allow such an access? Well, although most Brazilian population, they have a birth certificates, we see inequalities, especially with indigenous populations, where we see a greater number of children and adolescents without their birth certificate registration. And also how promising solutions are based on verification and zero proof knowledge. They are so reliable and auditable as the responsible agents for the verification. They have also to be reliable. If the website that you want to access just gets age information, the third verifier will have access to the information used to check our age at first. That may be your ID information, or maybe to raise a database about the requests that you get to check your age, where we end up having a list of navigation. Undoubtedly, the public power is considering some solutions based on the digital policies, national identity. We also have challenges as how many Brazilians they carry their national identity, how many Brazilians would have access to gov.br. Anyway, so many questions and little time. Implementation should also consider differences, inequalities. So we may have a system which will protect and not prevent freedom of expression, privacy, data protection. All these different layers should be balanced and calibrated, including difficulties by device sharing, the quality of devices, uploads of documents, camera, microphone, process data system for data estimates. I mean, all those components, they have to be calibrated to build up a digital environment where we would like that our adolescents would get empowered by that, without violating their rights. After all, whenever we talk about digital inclusion, quality of connection, and technological ownership, we still see challenges. where the digital environment should be a setting that would empower the ability and skills of children and adolescents, and not a setting where we would like children to run away from. Thank you. I would like to close this panel. We don't have any time left for questions. I apologize. Thank you so much for your online participation and digital inequalities in childhood and adolescence. So many challenges. I've learned so much, but we talked about some manipulation practices, the importance of active hearing, active speech in the policies involving technologies. We also raised some mechanisms for age verification, a granular consent, and many other aspects which are relevant to consider several challenges. And to close the session, I would like to say digital ECA approved. Now it's time to start the hard work. Thank you.
I would like now to thank you all. Let me ask you to take the picture. And once again, thank you very much for participating and thank you for your contribution.